Conversations. I'm your host, Kevin, and I'm with our co-host, Brian.
How you doing, Brian Russick, professional drummer, drum teacher, based out of the Suffolk County, Long Island, New York area. You can find me on the web at brianrussick.com.
And today we have Patrick Donnelly, Emmy-award winning and Telly-award winning director, producer, and cinematographer. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on, man.
It's a pleasure to have you on. So you've been really making some inroads in the industry. So just to get things started, can you give us a little bit about your background?
Sure. I loved like sci-fi movies when I was a kid. I'm giving my age away, but like Planet of the Apes, Logan's Run, of course, Star Wars. So basically, by the time I was 12 years old, I knew I wanted to make movies, which I was ahead of everybody else I knew, at least to that. And then it really changed,
So did you get a camera at a young age, and your parents bought you one, and you were able to get it started?
I had my parents had a little 8mm Super 8 camera, and I would go save up I take my paper route money and go buy film at Kmart and then go make my own little movies. So that's how I first started when I was, 12 years old and trying to make my paper mache stormtrooper outfits.
Awesome.
But then, I got, before I was in high school, I kind of knew what I wanted to do. My first real job I got a job as an usher at the local movie theater. I had that job for like 5 years until I went to college. And it was, seeing movies all the time. It was great. I loved it. And then I became, worked my way up to be a projectionist. And I got to handle the real film and all that sort of thing. That was great.
Oh, wow.
And then, and then basically I wanted to go to a big film school, somebody that, and at the time still is kind of, it was like NYU, USC, UCLA, Columbia, a few others were at the top film schools in the nation to go to. But unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of money. I couldn't afford to get any of those anyway.
Yeah.
But I remember like looking into like where to go, and there was this one school that was at the time. It was in this book by Leonard Maltin, The Filmmaker's Guide. I believe it's something. I don't get it. It's an old. It basically said, "Here's the best schools in the nation." And number 5 was this school that was a state school in California, San Francisco State, and that was after all these places that you heard where George Lucas went to, and that was there.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to go to San Francisco and become I went there and was able to afford it because I became a resident and did that sort of thing, which was a problem. Just we didn't have a lot of money, but it was a great school, and I'm glad I grew up down at the Jersey Shore, so I was happy to get out and go to California. And
oh, wow.
Especially San Francisco was great because it was just such a different place, and also the school was very artsy, very not USC, not NYU. It was like, it was more about, taking it to a more artistic level. I saw all these films that I had never heard of. I watched TV and saw the big budget movies, but all of a sudden you're seeing all these things that, you had to go, you never got your hands on or an idea, or able to see them. So that was very nice in that sense. So, getting to this different perspective that I was sort of unaware of.
Right.
Like in terms of your craft, what were some of the bigger lessons that you took away from school that you didn't know prior to attending?
Well, some bigger lessons from school was more just like the broad nature of cinema.
Okay.
Foreign films, films that hadn't been shown, that they had one print of, that were not on local TV when I was growing up. That sort of just a broader sort of things that you couldn't go see at the local New Jersey cinema in your lifetime. So it was just, doing all that and then seeing all these, and more just very artistic films that do I love now? No, but I'm glad I saw them. I like, I should say I didn't love any of them. Of course you do, but sometimes you're like, God, this is boring.
Yeah.
It's like,
Right.
sometimes it's like, okay, this is 20 minutes of a leaf blowing in the wind in close up. Like,
Yeah.
And sometimes they're just things that really touched you. It's like so that was helpful. It was more of an artistic and documentary style world. They weren't trying to, teach you how to become Steven Spielberg or George Lucas. It was more about how to be more of an artistic, which was great because I had already kind of known that world, and it broadened my horizons that way. So,
okay.
Yeah. And then basically, I graduated, got my bachelor's in cinema studies, and came back to find a job. Came back to New Jersey and couldn't really get any work like a lot of people. You hear that today too. It's like it was just hard to break in. I put in a lot of resumes, and for I guess the first 6 months after graduating, nothing really happened. Didn't get any callbacks. I started shooting and editing wedding videos for a local thing, and it was holding a camera and getting paid to do it. So that was
nice.
fun,
Yeah, right.
And I got to learn to edit those, and it was kind of rudimentary stuff, but it was actually getting paid as opposed to, hey, let's go make a movie.
Sure.
And then basically, I was just hoping something would happen, and just like I said, I'd come up to New York and just knock on doors, and nothing happened. And then finally, somebody did call me and said, "Hey, we'd like you to come up for an interview." And I had no idea about this company at all. And it was on a list, and I threw it out. I ended up going to this company. I had to go back 3 times to be the house production assistant for this company called Rick Levine Productions out in New York City. And at the time, Rick Levine was the top 2 commercial directors of the time doing commercials. He did a lot of famous, Diet Pepsi commercials. That like all $1 million for 30 seconds type of thing. And I had no idea until I walked into his beautiful building on the Upper East Side, and I was like looking around, and and then they hired me, and then so I got my start at a very high-end, top-level company.
Wow.
By luck, basically. It wasn't because, oh my God, I just
you just fell into it. Yeah, you just fell into it.
And so that was great. I worked there for about a year, and it was just, watching people. It was the first time you get to go watch big-time commercials where they're doing huge budgeted things for, a 60-second spot or a 30-second spot.
Right.
And, spending like $1.5 million on it. And it's, so I thought that's the way the world was. It was a kind of a bad way not bad. It was great. It's just that it wasn't the reality of what the world was, So my next job, I moved on. I wanted to try to move up and get out of just doing, I was working as a production assistant then. I got a job as a manager, it was basically a studio manager for this other gentleman named Peter Corbett. He was another pretty good director, but he was more of a technical. He did a lot of motion control, green screen. He owned his own gear, whereas when I had worked at my last job, it was just more, they hired in all the big people. This was more an in-house studio with motion control aspects, multiple cameras that I had to learn very fast and maintain. And it was just like, I worked there for like 3 years, and that was just, I learned, hands-on as opposed to reading about it in a book about this and this and that and that. Actually having to shoot some stuff for him and load the cameras and,
it sounds unique.
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was a very tough job. He was a tough guy to work for. It wasn't fun. It was, it was 17 hours a day, 6 days a week for, and then all of a sudden you're like, where'd my life go? Because,
Wow.
that's just the nature of the business. And,
Okay.
so I went from, like I said, this like very high end, top of the line to this sort of more middle brow, but really workaholic, hardworking, hands-on, which was the real helpful part. I mean, not a lot of, kids get to get 35 millimeter cameras and load them up and put the lens on and shoot something for somebody. So that was helpful in that. And then basically, just to move on, I just thought I got a couple of opportunities to start doing freelance work, and I went out as a key grip. And I don't know, like if you guys know the difference between like a key grips and gaffers, and I know you know all the terminology, but sometimes people are like, I don't know what they do.
Yeah, for our listeners, would you be able to describe some of these terms?
Sure. Like, well, a gaffer is usually the head lighting technician on a set, and he works just underneath the cinematographer. And the cinematographer also, talks to the director, and they help develop the look. Cinematographer says to the gaffer, I want a light over there, really high up, 2 lights over here. They want placement, and then they have to run all the electrical of that. Now, the key grip and the grips are gentlemen that are people. They usually were guys, unfortunately, at the time. And I mean, there wasn't always.
Right.
But it just basically the grips are in charge of like cranes, dollies, building stuff, helping do things with sets. You got to hang off of here. You got to do something. It's just we need to get the light over there 50 feet in the air. So you would rig a light on a crane and get it up. So that's how that
sounds pretty fun, though. Sounds like a pretty fun job.
Yeah, it could very well. Sometimes it was, but also part of this is like in the 90s. So it was a lot of it.
Yeah.
Was there was union jobs and non-union jobs, and the way you broke in was you worked non-union, which was usually like less money, you had to like really fight for your own time frame. It was like, in a union you work for 10 hours. In a non-union they'd say, we're not quite sure, and then all of a sudden you're 18 hours in, you're like, there's a few times that, it depends on who you're working with, as like anything. It's like, it was a lot of times it was a lot of fun, but a lot of times it was a long time. And then sometimes you're working like 20. I did a Mariah Carey music video that went 24 and a half hours.
Wow.
As a grip, I was on it. So, and then I had to go to another job with no sleep. And I remember like passing out somewhere in Midtown behind a dolly, and they had to wake me up. It was, that's just a younger man thing. And that was kind of, probably a lot less of that happens as much as it did then. It was also kind of back then, there's music videos. You still make them now, but there was a lot more of that. And that was usually not big time union jobs, which had more, people around that would, not, try to take advantage of. So you have a few years of dealing with that.
Why did those days run so long? Like they were on such such tight time schedule, they had to get it out that quickly, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, a lot of it was, it was just trying to squeeze in way too much really fast, because the star could not, they were only going to be here for this long, but then we have to go shoot all this other stuff. And then usually too, at that level, you got people trying to squeeze money out of it, doing this, trying to save the money. So instead of saying, okay, we're going to do 2 days, now we'll have this crew, work really long day, so I mean that was the nature. That did change. That's not like what it is anymore. I'm just, what I kind of went through there. And it also really just depended on the production company, the producers, the people that hire you. And sometimes you work with people you had great great rapport with, and just it was fine. It was wonderful. Even if it went long, you didn't mind because you liked them. Sometimes it
Right.
was just these companies you never heard of who came in, and the producer was from France, and now we're going to pay you cash at the end of the job. And there was always that, like, are you? Like,
Yeah,
always
right.
heard the stories of you couldn't trust everybody. In fact, I remember one job. It was a French director and producer who came here, and it was one of those all night shoots in Hell's Kitchen or something, and 3 o'clock
Yeah.
in the morning, and then they said they'd pay us cash, and then we have to get the cash later tomorrow morning. So back then everything was shot on film, so we just made sure, okay, no problem, but we're taking the negative with us. And they're like, what, like, and all of a sudden the
Yeah.
cash showed up. It was kind of weird. So
Oh, wow.
that happened a couple of times, unfortunately.
Very interesting.
Not to make it sound that bad, there was a lot of good moments.
Right.
So back in the, don't miss doing the music videos so much though. And even though they kind of, I know they exist, but they're just not, you don't see as much. This is back in when MTV was MTV as opposed to whatever it is now. So
yeah, it was in the 90s. It was everything.
yeah. So yeah, I did that for a few years, and then finally I just decided I had enough of it. I wanna shoot and become a cinematographer. I had done this sort of all my whole life. I had done my own shorts here and there, and I just decided, as I was a key grip and I had worked on TV shows. I was in Florida and Universal for like a year working on a TV show and doing a lot of different things. I just kind of got sick of that aspect of it, wanted to move on. So I just started shooting student films for people. And then I think the first one I did, in fact, that's what I got wrong. The first film I did was a Columbia grad student's short that he wasn't paying. He just was looking for a cinematographer. And I read the script. I said, I'm interested. He sent me the script. I was like, oh, this is really good. And it was like on digital video. It was like that was the early advent of TV, digital video, as opposed to where everything was like low budget was 16. This was that just time period where it was starting to shift,
Okay.
because it was just cheaper to go buy tapes, and cameras had gotten better enough that people accepted them. Whereas before, video just looked so like, it looked like a soap opera on TV.
Yeah.
Anyway, getting to this point, I did this short. It's called A Alike, and I had fun. It was a bunch of college students, which I kind of remember being, and I just kind of walked them through it, helped them do it. I kind of had to show them how to do everything. We shot the film. He had some good actors, and then I forgot about it. That it was just an excuse to, hey, let's do something. Let me try to break in to try to be a cinematographer. And then luckily 6 months later, he won the Academy Award for it. So,
oh, wow. I was going to say, yeah, I was going to say, how do you tell the difference between a cinematographer and a director? What's the real difference there?
Well, cinematographer is just he or she are just in charge of the imagery, or of choosing where the camera is and lighting it, and directing how the lighting is. Director is more in charge of the story and dealing with the actors.
Yes.
And just trying to get the actors to, get across what they hope to, what that director wants to be. And basically that's, that my first director that I worked for, that I mentioned before, Rick Levine, he was a director camera person, which was very unusual. In fact, that was the first guy I really started working for. And they, you didn't see a lot. Usually there was separate jobs, director, cinematographer. That's why, as my career went on, I became a director cinematographer. That's because I just wanted to have both says in how it looks and how the actors pull it off,
Right.
and
Interesting.
that's why, I've been doing that for, most of my career. So once I got, but I did spend about a decade just being a cinematographer and jumping around from there.
Okay. I mean, what did you prefer? Directing, cinematographer? Like, what was the better
Both,
job? Both?
both, yeah.
Okay.
But I think partly as a cinematographer, this is part of the industry too. You get hired by some directors, and you just enjoy it. It's great. You like working for them. You get hired by a lot of people that don't know what they're doing, and
Yeah.
you got kind of like, I don't think we should do it that way. It shouldn't be a two shot because we're in close-ups here, and that's not going to match. You're not going to be able to edit, and they don't get it, and you're like, oh god, it's this basic sort of. Sometimes some people had a lot who were really good and knew what they were doing, had no problem, and then you got to collaborate. But a lot of times it was just trying to, with some directors, it was just trying to have them not do it in a, do it in a more professional manner and more visually arresting manner, as opposed
Okay.
to that sense. So
Interesting.
that's why I kind of wanted to do both with my career, so I didn't have to have that argument. So.
Right. So, like, okay, a director I would think of, Woody Allen. Did he do cinematography as well? Because I know he was quite picky with his actors.
No, he never did. He hired his people. It's very, like I
Interesting.
said,
Okay. It's
there's
very
not.
technical, right?
Yeah. I mean, you really have to know the cameras, the lenses, how to light them, how to, make sure you have enough light to do this and make it look good.
So it's a unique position you were in to be both.
To get to that level, yeah,
To be
it took
both
me a while
at
too. I
that
mean,
level.
because it's not a, like I said, you don't hear of a lot of like famous directors from the past who were both. There are a few, but even as I'm saying this, I'm trying to go, okay, Peter Hyams. I don't know if he was a '70s director. He shot his own stuff. He did Outland, I think. A lot of sci-fi. He was great. He was one of those only guys I could remember going like, oh yeah, he shot him too. Of course, there was others, but
Right.
it was always a separation of those things, and I understand why, because it's it is doubling your job. It's hard to do it. I think the reasoning why I wanted to do that is that I had been a cinematographer for so long, and I got the chance to start directing and shooting it. I kind of knew the cinematography, like I didn't have to think about it anymore. So I
Yeah.
wasn't really I just was like, that was just easy. Directing was more interesting, interacting with the actors, thinking about, hey, let's revise the script, or let's make sure we go here and shoot it this way. Or
Yeah.
we want this sort of look. I mean, that was just more interesting to me anyway. So, and that's also in the context, just in terms of the scope of where I was going. After I, like I mentioned, I did that. Like the student short that helped me move on to do other things, and I got basically I decided I had to shoot my own first feature, and I wrote, shot, and directed and financed a film called Divergence. It's and it was a drama that it did great. It won, like, I got to travel over the United States to film festivals,
Oh,
and
wow.
went to France with it, and it got Variety gave it a great review.
Nice.
That was very helpful. I mean, they were saying it was basically a film about the troubles of a woman. Of course, part of it too, since I was self-financing this and shooting it myself,
Yeah.
I wrote a script that I knew, like, okay, well, how can I do this and not like break the budget? So I wrote a script about a place I knew, Jersey Shore. Okay, yeah, but it's expensive to be in the Jersey Shore in the summer. Okay, Jersey Shore in the winter, no one's there. And you get a house cheap on the beach, and the beach is beautiful when it's cold. Okay, what's it about? And then, like, I literally I wasn't thinking I had the story to tell. The story came out of how can I make this cheap, and
Right.
afford it, but still look good. And so I kind of developed the story about this woman who had problems in her life, and she's dealing with it, and she's hiding out in the Jersey Shore. And this was in 2005. I did this. It was also, we were dealing with the war in Iraq, and I had a soldier who had got wounded coming back after, and these two kind of lost souls meet each other down in the Jersey Shore during the dead of winter and quietly fall in love and that sort of thing, And it was. I always get kind of a laugh thinking like, well, where'd you come up with this? I'm like, it was kind of the budget. I couldn't afford a lot of people. I couldn't afford extras. I couldn't afford, I was like, hey, you ever go to Seaside Heights in January, and there's no one there and they're happy for anything. So it ended up being affordable for me to make a film. I shot it on film and I DP'd it as well. That was a life changer for me. It was my first feature that, and it did really well going through the film festival circuit and all that. So that was fun.
Awesome. For our listeners, can you describe what a DP is?
DP is a director of photography.
Oh, okay, got it.
A cinematographer, director of photography, same thing. So, sorry, I'm using the short terms. Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Director DP was what I would call who I am.
Okay.
So, like in terms of ideation, where did you typically like get these stories? Does it just like flow in your mind, or do you watch something and that inspires you, or you read books? Like, where does your ideas typically come from?
I think, in terms of like that, you kind of that's a good question. It's like I'm kind of saying like, whoa, I did this on a budgetary basis, and I had to come up with a scenario that would be affordable to do, but still be interesting. So I was like, how to be a sort of quiet drama, couple actors on the seaside, and a love story. So, kept it smaller, but still could have visual interesting aspects to it.
Right.
And then you just go into, I remember like just looking at a lot of the films from history. I've always been a film buff, watching movies my whole life, going way back. I just was looking at, romantic films and I'm not even really into them that much, but the ones that I did like, I'm like, okay, so you would like grasp something from this, you grasp something from that. You don't want to steal, you don't want to copy, you don't want to remake, but you can take some of the ideas and some of the nuances that other directors from the past did. And I think that's what I brought to to this Divergence, my feature. It was just, luckily my wife is a producer, and she was my wife at the time too, and she helped me get through it. She produced it for me, and
wow.
So that was, it was an in-family thing.
That's amazing.
And the other aspects why a lot of people think, well, where'd you get the money to shoot that? And it's like, I got a lot of, because I've been hiring people, I got a lot of favors. I got a lot of people that I had been giving money to for real jobs to come in and, help me out. And could you come down and, so I'd get free grips, free gaffers, free sound department, people that were friends of mine that I've, I wasn't taking advantage. So, of course, you're taking advantage. But you had to say, "Listen, I'll hire you on a real one in a couple of weeks."
Yeah, okay? Just hold on a little bit, buddy, and I'll get you back.
Exactly. So that was helpful. That's how I got that under my belt to actually, direct and come up with my. And I hadn't been really a writer prior to that. I mean, I'd written some things, but I don't really consider myself even a writer now. But I wrote that script. Once again, I came at it not with this. It was more of a kind of, how can I really do this, and how can I do it financially? How can I do it, economically, and without going into super debt on this. So that's how that kind of went. And then I, that like watching my movies my whole life and film school, all that stuff sort of seeps back in. And then you finally come up with this, okay, I can do this. So that was, it's been a while. I'm thinking about it now. It's like, oh yeah, that was, it was tough, but it was a lot of fun too. You know, it's like it's
Yeah, I
great
mean, it
to see.
sounds like to me you're hitting it at every angle. You're
Yeah,
coming at it, you know, with okay, I can do X, I can do Y, I can do Z.
exactly. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and there's a lot of aspects to the this industry that you have to get lucky sometimes. I mean, it's not about, oh, he's so talented. You know, I was one thing I think I am talented at. I seem to be able to find good actors,
Yeah.
which I don't know if that's a talent. I think it's probably just luck. But like the actors that I got to be in my feature they were not known, they weren't not famous, yeah, but they were great in it, and they did, got great reviews, and it was that was helpful. And that I've had that, you know, that ongoing where I think I do cast well, which is part of the game. I
Yeah.
mean, especially if you're a director, cinematographer, and the same thing, you have to rely upon your actors a lot more than say uh, the way most people work, because you get more. Cinematographer does this, the director talks to the actors, and then whereas I make sure I hire the person that I can trust, that you do a lot of rehearsal with them, you tell them your views of what you're hoping for, and then you kind of just, when you start shooting, you just you trust them. It's no longer like you did that wrong. It's like, no, if that's the way you want to take it, I agree. Or like, no, we can't do it that. That's just like, if you ever seen, any documentaries about Kubrick behind the scenes, and Stanley Kubrick directing The
Yeah.
Shining. There's some great
Yeah.
documentaries out there that it's like,
He was wild.
he was tough on actors, but it was Stanley Kubrick, so he got away with it.
Yeah.
Whereas I just, and Stanley was not a director. He did shoot some of his own things, but you would hire a camera person for him too. But my point is like, you have to rely more so, especially coming from this sort of weird viewpoint of being director, cinematographer. Uh, you have to rely more upon trusting your actors to and just rehearsing them enough that they understand what you're hoping for those characters, but also bringing something to it from themselves. That's usually the thing that really helps. It's just when they are invested in it beyond what the script says or what I say, because that's like, wow, that's so good. Well, that's bring some of their own body and humanity to it, and
That's
that helps
awesome.
sell scenes, sell premises, and sell just, well, that really doesn't make sense, but if you do it this way, people will believe it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Like hiring actors, is that more of an intuitive process, or do you have kind of like a checklist of like, I'm looking for this trait, this trait, this trait?
It's more intuitive, and also, once again, it's such a wide range of projects. Now, I'm talking about my feature film, but the majority of the things I do are commercials. I've been doing commercials because why? You make a lot more money,
Yeah.
and you get paid a lot more. And
Yeah.
is it what I wish I could do? No, I'd rather just be doing features, but feature, especially even more so now, it's like they're either huge budget, or they're kind of, even if you spend a couple of $1 million on things, it's hard to make money back on them. So kind of I drifted into just shooting and directing commercials because I had the ability to. I got hooked in with a few different companies where I was doing these things. And I had such a long tenure as a DP. I'd shot. This is backing up a little bit. There was about 6 or 7 years where I worked for a company. I was VH1.com. It's called Live at VH1, and it was called Live at MTV.com. And it was live performances of, whoever they could get that week. And in the span of all those years, I shot like 300 different big people. And some of them weren't even big
Yeah.
yet. Some of them, they've just walked on set, and I'm going like, who's this? I never heard of them. I don't know. And then all of a sudden we shoot this crazy person, and then and then also at the end it's like, I hope I'm not getting, there was this very big star. He became a big star, but at the time he had this metal bracy thing around his mouth, and apparently he had broken his jaw or something, but he would still be able to sing through it, and he just didn't care, and he went up and he did it, and he was nuts. It was just a small little stage in Midtown Manhattan, and I just tried to keep him in the can, and then all of a sudden he was screaming, he ran off, and hi, I met Kanye West. It's like,
oh
really?
wow,
Yeah.
It's like, I think he wasn't even, he had just broke out. So I don't even know if this was like early on when he just broke through. He was kind of known for, he has this metal brace.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing. He really needed it, but he was an unknown at the time. Maybe he was known to a degree, but not to the Kanye West we know now.
So like you filmed a lot of these guys. Were you kind of able to tell, like, at that time, there's something special about this guy? I feel like he's gonna blow up.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think so. There was I shot a lot of guys that are in the news today, unfortunately. Another gentleman that's in the news every night down in Lower Manhattan, shot him a bunch too. And they were stars. You just knew it. I mean, and I ended up shooting both of them quite a bit. But amongst hundreds more. Some of them were people I wish I was, people I was really into their music. So it was great, but it was also, it wasn't unlike, what was interesting, it's documentary film, it was live. And there wasn't like, let's do that one again. No, they're just going out there. I can't screw up, because if I go out of focus, then, I can't ask,
you got a problem there.
We have to do that. They don't want to do that. They're on their, they got to go to the next gig. So it was helpful in that sense. Once again, this was right around the time I had talked about doing my feature. It was in the same time period. I was doing both of these sort of things.
Now, you mentioned your wife. You said your wife was a producer?
Yes, she still is.
Okay, great. So for our listeners, could you sort of break down what a movie producer or what a film producer does?
Sure. Well, I mean, a producer is the person that is in charge mainly for the budgetary aspects of shoots. So they know that, okay, we have to go shoot this commercial, and they only have they have $100,000, and they need to do 2 30-second spots, and they want it to be in Times Square with 3 different performers. So they have this budget when they have to make that happen. So
right.
They have to know, well, we hire this, they need an art department to build a set. They need to hire a sound. They need to hire a cinematographer. They need to hire the director or work with a director to do that. They need to get a van, a couple of vans. We need to go get a couple of trucks. We need to hire the lights. We need to get all the lighting gear. We need to have that deliver. We have to come up with scheduling. We have to come up with, it's everything basically beyond the creative aspects. It's more about the financial and overall producing, helping the director and the rest of the crew shoot it, and being in charge of the money and trying not to go over budget.
So
which is always hard because they always don't give you enough money. And they say,
yeah, to me, it sounds like producing is like being the glue, kind of like in music, the bass guitar. I would say it's kind of a glue between, the guitarist and the singer and the drummer.
Sure, certainly. Or even, it's like the manager of the Beatles. It's like Brian Epstein.
Yeah.
It's like, did he write great songs? No, but the Beatles wouldn't have been the Beatles with, or anybody who helps develop talent and get them to a place where you can get the product done, you can get the film done, you can get the song done, or whatever you need. It's more the money aspect is very interesting, you know, and hard to do.
Yeah, sounds like it.
So yeah, you mentioned earlier on that when you're younger, especially, you had a fascination with sci-fi, especially Star Wars. Did you always have like a fascination with the future and how the future would be? And were you ever able to create a movie or anything that told a story about the future?
Yeah, I did actually. Fun. Yes, I loved. You know, I just grew up in that '70s, '80s era of sci-fi. So it's like Close Encounters. I mentioned before, like, you know, one of my favorites is Logan's Run. It feels like the world's turning into Logan's Run now. You know, it's like, oh wow, this stuff is really starting to happen. It seems like, you know, if you haven't seen it, it's a great movie. It's, you know, it's. I was always into, you know, sort of '70s, '80s sci-fi, and it seems like, you know, I think we were mentioning before, it's like the world is changing as AI is, you know, creating characters, and maybe do we need to, you know, I mean, I don't think it's going to take over. AI is going to take over to the degree that some of us in my industry are terrified of. I think it is going to hurt some people, but at some point, you still need, you know, AI is AI, but they still, sometimes you just need somebody with a creative vision, and then, you know, can't does is
Or
AI ever going to get
implementation.
a
You need
creative,
someone.
yeah,
You need someone to implement it.
and implement it and have a vision? Whereas AI is just like, there's maybe AI is smarter than you, but can you, you know, go that route? So that's why I
Right.
thought, you know, like movies are we're kind of living through things I grew up watching. You know,
Like
so
writing wise, what did you think of Philip K. Dick?
oh, I loved it, loved it. I
Okay.
mean, I didn't even I forgot him. I loved Blade Runner. I mean, that
Blade
was another,
Runner.
yeah.
Yeah, awesome movie.
Which was funny. I worked, like I mentioned before, I worked at the movie theater. Remember, which most people don't know, when Blade Runner came out, I worked at a movie theater, and no one came to see it.
Yeah.
Nobody. There was no sellouts. There was nothing. I remember loving it and going in there as an usher, just watching it, and it was me and two other geeks sitting in and it was just like, I was like, why isn't there anybody here? And it's like, you forget that, you know, time. It didn't do very well when it first came out, but it's now this beloved thing, beloved movie that everyone talks about. So that's kind of ironic, you know. In terms of like other work I did a sci-fi version. It was a short, a half-hour short called Julius Caesar. It was an adaptation of Shakespeare's play, but I did it with a sci-fi edge to it, sci-fi, you know, and that was a lot of
Interesting.
fun.
Yeah, interesting.
And that was in terms of other side that I did dive in there. I remember, like you were saying, oh, you mentioned sci-fi. I was like, I remember like, oh, I want to do like Shakespeare. I want to like, but I don't want to do Shakespeare. So I don't want to, you know, 16th century clothes. Oh wait, you do sci-fi. So yeah. And I just took a part of Julius Caesar and made it into a more short form thing, utilizing it as a more sci-fi version that I was quite happy with. So and it was a lot of fun to do.
Awesome.
So I know like a lot of the depictions of the future of sci-fi, they're kind of dystopian, you know, robots, computers everywhere warring or fighting. Have you seen any like alternative depictions where it actually looks like the future looks good? Like any movies that really stood out to you that have an interesting depiction of the future?
That's a really interesting question. It's a tough one. Um, Nothing's jumping out at me because you have to have the conflict. You know, if everything's good, it's kind of boring. So, I mean, right? I mean, if
Isn't
there's
it
no
called
like,
the
you need a
inciting?
hero to overcome something and win the battle, and at the end they're all happy. But you know, yeah, no, I haven't. I'm sure there is something, but nothing's jumping out at me at the moment. Do
Yeah,
you have
is
anything like
is
that
that
that you
called
guys
an
watched?
inciting event or inciting incident in screenwriting?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Oh, inciting. Oh, actually, no, now I forget how to say it. Uh, an event where it happens in a site. What's the word? Inciting incident. Am I getting that wrong? Inciting incident for screenwriter?
Are you asking me if that's something that occurs or?
Oh, I'm just wondering about it, if that's relevant to screenwriting.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it's all about. I don't. It's all about everyone else has their take on life, and your interpretation of it, and how you want to get that across. So it's. Of course, there could be events that form where you're taking things.
Yeah.
Like I said, it was my first feature. It was dealing with the Iraq War and a soldier coming home. So was I incited because I had been in? No, I just thought, well, this is what's happening in the culture at the moment. I should try to develop that and just not say something beyond the guy meets a girl on the beach. It's like give it some more wider motifs that can affect and that everybody goes through and can understand. So.
Right.
To answer your question, I think I can only think of maybe like Futurama. That's a somewhat normal depiction of the future where it's not super dystopian.
Yes, a good comedy like Futurama.
Like what technology have you seen like in one of these movies that you would like to be present now? For me, I would say maybe like a teleportation machine.
Teleport. Yeah, I think like an old-fashioned Star Trek teleporter would be fine. That'd be.
Yeah.
I always like that. Seems like that would be a kind of neat thing to let's go here and let's go there, but better than like that was the one thing we were mentioning Blade Runner. That was very gritty and dirty and rainy and lots of guns. So
Yeah.
Star Trek had a little more hopeful aspect to it. So.
What did you think about Aliens? I know for this time it was really amazing, really convincing depiction of like
Aliens 2 or Alien?
both. Like
I mean, I always loved the first one, like everybody, and I was surprised by Aliens because at that time period, sequels just were never as good, and it was so different because it was, it was not Ridley Scott, it was Mr. Titanic, right? I mean, basically, it was good because it was different, but still had, you knew you were in the same world, but it was a different take on it, and a great little adventure movie. Yeah, I loved both of them, and then they started getting a little weird after that.
Some I kind of know about.
I still watch them, even sometimes like the ones you don't like. I'm like, oh, it's better than watching something. Even the bad ones, you kind of enjoy your way through it.
Yeah, Aliens is great.
Yeah.
Someone knows about the 80s movies, especially. There was like really distinctive characters. Like you had like E.T., Terminator,
yeah,
Aliens, Predator, Chucky, like really distinct characters. Like what happened to that?
Yeah, right.
I had one of my friends from college. She broke into the industry too, and she worked on Chucky. She was a executive producer on that Chucky.
Wow.
Couple of those back in the day. So now that you mentioned it, I was like, oh yeah. So, but I don't know. I forgot where we kind of got on a tangent here. I was just trying to remember what else I could tell you about. Oh, well, I guess what I've been doing, in the last portion of my life now. I mean, I've been doing commercials, doing a lot of stuff for MTV, Paramount, VH1. I was lucky enough to win an Emmy on one of them. I was lucky enough to win a Telly Award on another commercial. And that's
nice, congrats.
And yeah, it's helpful. It's fun. And then I just the newest thing was like once COVID hit and we all had the 2.5 to 3 years of not really working like we used to. I used that time to kind of develop a TV pilot. It was one area that I had never worked in.
Okay.
I had done drama. I just like, well, how about trying to do a pilot? And a good friend of mine from college, he's a writer. he had this script, and we were both looking, well, what can we do right now? I said, well, I had this office in Manhattan, and I was like, why don't we once again, it was one of those write around what you have, So I did this. He wrote the script it's called Cause Celeb, and it's about TV stars and people of how people move through today's culture in stardom in the different levels of this. It's basically about a teen queen starlet who wants to break out of being on the kind of like Disney-like TV show and become like a sexy sex symbol in the bigger world, to move on, because she's turning 19 years old and she can't play the 12-year-old much longer type of thing. So that's part. We thought, well, we can have some fun with that, and we shot. We just rode around shooting it at my office space in New York, it's about a photographer shooting her to try to change her image, and that we just finished that about I started going to the film festivals about a year ago, and it's done incredibly well. We won 27 film festivals.
Wow.
And I've traveled all over the country and won some big ones, and a lot of some of them were just a few online film festivals, but it's good to have people see them.
Absolutely. Get it out there. Yeah.
So that's what I've been kind of really working on the most, and it got picked up by excuse me, a film company called Echelon. They're the distributors. They are trying to it takes a few years if you come up with a TV product and you start by showing at festivals and trying to get a good word of mouth, and getting in front of networks is the hard part. And we've had some success. It's got on to a few different online film festivals and other things to try. But it's still an ongoing process. And also just trying to get to the point where we could, do like a 6-part to 8-part series.
Right.
We've developed ideas for that, but you're just trying to get to the point where we could see if somebody be interested in throwing money towards it. And we've done it's been successful, and it's an ongoing thing. A lot of like TV shows take years to get in front of the right people. You just
now I would imagine it always comes down to the money.
Yeah, it's tough, and it's just also, once again, this post-COVID time period has been bad for a lot of people in the industry.
Yeah,
and also just the changing times. People are uncertain, like we mentioned before, talking about AI and where is the people like myself who spent their life working in this industry, where is this going to all take us? And is it going to take us anywhere? Is it going to say goodbye? We're not sure.
Yeah.
I don't really think that's going to happen. I think once again, it's still, it can help with effects. It can help for a lot of other things that were more, harder to do in the past. But you still have to, you can't really. I don't see, like, it's still about acting. It's still about talking to an actor and trying to get a performance across that. A laptop really is not going to really.
Sure.
Yeah, we're getting to the top of the hour, but to kind of close this out, what advice would you give for someone who's trying to navigate like this incredibly turbulent period? Obviously, we have AI, but we also have like something like YouTube and all these other platforms where independent creators, they can just put their stuff out there and blow up. Like,
I think you just got to. I kind of, it's the same thing I did. You just keep trying. It's really hard to predict the future. I never really knew what was around the corner. It's easy to talk about it now, and I did this and that, but
sure.
If you don't attempt, you never know. It could, some of these things, like we're talking about, could be like, oh, this is going to change. Well, maybe not, or figure out a way to incorporate into where the world's coming. If you don't, you hear a lot in today's generation. It's like who are trying to break in. they're kind of defeatists. It's sort of like, no, you can't be that way. You have to, if you got something to say, go make it, get a camera, go do it.
You got to be positive.
Be positive, or not even be positive, just be fearless. Because if you're scared, like if I do that, I should, well, then maybe you shouldn't be in a creative industry that is
Right.
very fickle too. It changes left and right. You never know what's going to be in front of you in a year, 6 months, or if you're going to have a job. It's like it's a tough world. It's a freelance life.
Are you glad you got involved early on?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's the only thing. Like I said, since I was 12 years old, that's all I wanted to do. I don't even know what else to do anymore. I mean, maybe I could go work at a movie theater again. But
yeah.
So, but yeah, I just say, don't give up, keep trying, and just if you have something to say, try to get it across. I mean, you could do it you could shoot something on. If you don't have the money, you could shoot something on your iPhone. It's like, I don't suggest that, but it's still, if that's what you got, just do a good story on your iPhone as opposed to, don't make it look, try not make it not look like you're on your iPhone telling a story that you want to get across. So.
But you just got to do it and put it out there.
Exactly.
That's great advice.
So yeah, where can our audience find you at?
Well, my company's called Cinema 5 Films. It's at cinema5films.com. It's cinema FIVE 5films.com. And it's some of the work, all my work's on there, and commercials and some of the things they're talking about.
Awesome, man. It was amazing having you on, and we definitely like to have you back, man. We could have easily went another hour.
Oh, well, I appreciate you guys asking me to come. It's nice talking to you guys, and I'm glad I got to give it a shot.
Yeah, no,
you had some great questions, and I think I appreciate you trying to say, just elaborate for people who don't know what a DP is. It's like you live your life, you think everybody.
Because we always see it, like everyone sees movies, everyone watches movies. It's like, okay, I'm watching Mrs. Doubtfire, and what's the guy behind the glass? At the beginning when he's doing the singing, with the bird.
Yeah.
Voice acting, you got all the guys behind the kind of like glass, and they're all smoking cigars.
Right.
So I'm assuming those are probably the producers.
Those are the producers. Yeah.
Yeah.
The cliche was, producers smoke cigars. My wife's a producer. She doesn't smoke cigars. So.
Yeah, we'd like to thank everybody for tuning in. We'll catch y'all next time.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Nice to meet you.